Well, welcome back. I'm pretty excited to be here again today. I woke up and I didn't even know what I was going to teach on. But then the girlfriend woke up as well, and she was wasting a lot of emotional energy. Um, so I figured, well, why don't we just talk about this thing called energy? Because it is extremely important, and we just kind of gloss over it. It's not something to be glossed over. Uh, they say the everything is energy. We can take an atom and look at it under a microscope, and it's 99.99999% space, but in that space is a measurable wavelength of energy. So everything is energy. So if everything is energy, then what can we glean from that? Well, we know that the first law of thermodynamics is uh, energy can't be created or destroyed, merely transferred or transformed. So what we're going to look today at is a lot of y'all are stuck either in a business, in a relationship, in a friendship, in finances. And what it really comes down to is you're leaking energy. So we're going to take a look of what this energy thing is. And share. So you should be able to see that, yes. Okay. So let's go to Genesis 1:28. First time God speaks to Adam. And he says, be fruitful, do multiply, do subdue, do replenish, and have dominion. And so those five, as I outlined in my book, be, do, have, are in every system. And I work with the body, so it's in every one of the body systems. I've worked in as a software engineer, and they show up in even software engineering systems. So if it's a living cycling system, they will always have these five laws. I call them the primitive laws. And one of these is the law of energy. And so we're going to take a look at that today. But the Bible tells us to be fruitful. And that is to activate energy. Okay, so what does that look like? Well, it looks like intention before influence. So intention. God has an intention for every one of us, and he's not here to hide it. So the intention of my life is to bring this content, which the Holy Spirit removed the scales from my eyes so that I could see at age 40. And I've been a completely different human. I'm 48 now over the last 8 years. And all of this simply because the scales were taken off my eyes. And so God has an intention for each one of us. If you're not aware of what that intention is, then you go to the de facto one, which basically says whatever it is that you do, whether you eat or whether you drink, you do it all for the glory of God. And so that's the default intention. But my specific one is to take this content to the masses. And so I've elected YouTube to do it. It's a one to many. It is different getting in front of a camera. It's very different from getting up in front of a crowd where I could talk back and forth and actually read the room and make sure things land via their body language. I don't get that now, so it's a little bit different skill set. So please be patient and grant me some grace. It's not easy to do this every day, for sure. So this is the intention for my life. But intention is before influence. And so influence, think that is motion or action. Because if I'm out of alignment from my intention, then things are going to leak energy. Okay, so we're going to have leaking energy. And so I'm not much of an artist, but I'm going to try. Make a little bucket here. I'll put a little hole. I'm dripping energy out of here. Okay, so we're leaking energy out of this pretty sad looking bowl. So it leaks into 4 areas that we can identify. Okay, the first one is, and this one, I'll be honest, is the hardest one for me, is distraction. Okay, And this is literally just scattered focus. And so what I have discovered in my later years, I didn't discover this early in life, but in my later years, uh, the the food supply throughout the United States has been sprayed with something known as folic acid, which is actually a neurotoxin if you can't make the transition from folic acid into methylfolate. And so it was really, really hard until I started supplementing a methylated version of folic acid known as methylfolate. And so once I did that, then the distractions were a lot less. But until I put that in there, it was really difficult to just sit down and teach. Okay, the next one where energy leaks is doubt. And this is, I'm going to call it storytelling. So as the people I coach, I went over the other day about the realm of knowing. Well, all of us have this internal dialogue that occurs in our head, and it's only from and has its basis in whatever that realm of knowing or that perspective prism is. And so everything comes through that. And so what I have my clients do is to name the storyteller in your head, because without naming it, it floats around as a mist. And then you ever tried to grab a mist, you just can't do it. And so my storyteller's name is Wilbur. The girlfriend storyteller's his name is Azriel. My buddy Josh, who's in Kentucky, his storyteller's name is Smith. Because when you put a name on it, you actually put it in a silo, and it loses its power, honestly. Um, so that internal storyteller of creating doubt, that you're not good enough, or um, I'm all alone in this. It's all up to me to make this succeed. And that thing gets rolling. And if you don't disrupt that pretty early in the cycle, when I was coaching, I used to tell my players, I'm like, listen, when momentum shifts, that snowball, it's a snowball at the top of the mountain, but there's definitely a point of no return when it's not a snowball anymore. It's an avalanche, and you're not stopping that. So you really got to keep that storyteller creating doubt in check. The next one is disorder. And this is, I'm gonna call this cluttered environment. So whatever it is that you're going to do, if you can see my desk, it's pretty clean here. And I always clean it up before I do anything, because just that clutter is actually really overwhelming to the nervous system. The nervous system is always trying to make order and sense of the things that it's taking in from the peripheral nervous system. So just cleaning up your space will provide you some organizing order there. All right, and the last one is this connection. And this one is connect to intention before influence. And this is really important that we do this, um, because when things get really difficult, if we're taking action but it's empty and intentionless, it's a waste of energy. It's like putting your car in the driveway, leaving it in park, and then flooring the vehicle, the gas pedal to the floor until all the gas is out of the car. You expanded a lot of energy, but it didn't go anywhere. It didn't move you in any way towards the intention. And so what we always want to do is connect intention before we move to influence or action. Okay. So how do we get into alignment so we can align our energy with intention? Okay. So I'm going to start with being. So I don't know if y'all know, being is spirit in the meat suit, right? The meat suit is just what it is. our being is that essence. And so what we want to start with is desire. I believe it's in Psalms where it says, delight yourself in the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart. It's that desire, that thing that really wants to push you, and you know, you can't help but do that type of desire. And so, because that's gonna, once we get that, channeled, that'll be the fuel that keeps us going, and it's not going to lead to burnout if it's aligned properly. So then after desire, you have dream. Okay, this is the desired outcome. And this is important. One of the ways that the girlfriend was leaking energy this morning was she was focusing on, that's going to be over here in this distraction, focusing on an outcome that was undesirable for her. I don't understand why human beings do this, but we always seem to go to the downside of the coin rather than actually being like, oh, okay, what's the upside to this? Because there's always two sides. I've never seen a one-sided sheet of bread, one-sided sheet of paper, one-sided wall. There's always two sides. We've just been conditioned to go to the downside of the coin. And so waking up to that fact, it allows you to take a step back and actually be like, okay, what's the upside here rather than the downside? How can we move the needle in our favor versus how, I call them the to me crowd, allow a circumstance, event, or thing to happen to us rather than be like, oh, okay, the world is going to present you with people and circumstance. They're going to reveal where you're not free. So, okay, how can I be free here? Like step outside of the circumstance and really objectively look at, hey, what's really going on here? And then take what action needs to be taken in that. But that's the dream side. And then the last one is going to be discipline. And so discipline here is taking the steps needed and staying with it. It's hard to get up here every day and create content. I have a lot of respect for the ones that do it and are really good at it. I'm not really good at it yet, but I'm still becoming. And as I become, the sphere of people who I can influence will grow. And I'm a king in God's kingdom, and I'm just looking for the crowd that I get to serve. So once you get these three in total alignment, this desire, dream, and discipline, it's going to produce what I'm going to call emotion. Okay. And that is just energy in motion. That makes it easier. Energy in motion. Okay. And that energy that we want to channel it into two things. I'm going to call it language plus focus. So as we channel into language plus focus, that's going to give us another cool thing, and that's going to give us direction. And that direction is going to point us on a path towards intention. That makes sense? Okay. So this over here creates friction. And what we're trying to do, I have to scoot it over a little bit. Come on. No, I don't want to do that. Go back. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get from friction to what I'm going to call fruitfulness. That's where we're headed. So I'm going to come up here just a little bit. Okay. So we're trying to get from friction to fruitfulness. And that comes through desire, dream, and discipline. Desire ignites the dream. The dream gives structure to the desire. And discipline brings both into motion. Okay? So desire ignites the dream. Dream gives structure to the desire. Discipline brings both into motion or existence. Okay, so now we're gonna go back down here. So fruitfulness. So what does that look like? So let's start with, at the base level, you have intention. Okay. And then intention gives way or creates order. So once you have the desired outcome, right, which is creating content, because this is what God has put me here to do, it's going to create order. So there are some things that steps I had to take, right, of all the different things. You needed a camera, I needed a way that I could use a whiteboard. I'd love a vibe board at some point because they're awesome. But right now, this is what I've got, and this is what I'm going to use. But one day, there would definitely be a vibe board. I've tried using whiteboards. It's just really hard to see them on camera. But I like to draw. I'm not a very good artist, but I like to draw things out because I'm a visual guy. I think most people are. But once order takes shape, then it's going to give way and create focus. So now my focus every day is to get up, figure out what it is I'm going to teach on. And then I have a process to how I do it, get everything ready, everything in order so it makes sense. And then I sit down at the camera. Sometimes it takes me 2 or 3 shots, but hopefully I get good enough where it only takes one. But then focus is going to create what is all clarity, and it is very important. If you don't know where you're going, how do you know you're going to get there? And how is it measurable along the way? So it gives clarity, and clarity opens up energy in alignment. And that is the thing. Because once energy is in alignment, then it flows. And you definitely want it to flow. So what you don't want to do is end up here where you have, desire without discipline is waste. Discipline without desire is duty. And then dream without either is just a wish. And so a lot of people get stuck and like, oh, this is what I wanted to do. I thought this was the intention for my life, but it really just turns out to be a wish. And the reason is because they're lacking the desire, they're lacking the dream, they're lacking the discipline. And those 2 things create a being for you that produces emotion or energy in motion, right? And then that emotion expressed in language plus focus will give you direction. And then direction is going to point you towards intention. And so think of it, intention is kind of like a dance. There are going to be days you dance towards the intention. There are going to be days you dance away. But it's got to be that desire that brings you back in line. It's like the North Star, brings you back into alignment with your intention, so that we don't come over here and disconnection, right, was one of the main areas that we leak at. It's because we've lost the intention and understanding why you're doing what you're doing. Simon Sinek would call this your why. But ultimately where it leads to is the intention creates order, order creates focus, focus creates clarity, and that energy is in alignment. And so now you're moving. To be fruitful means to enter the rhythm where energy moves through you versus against you. And if you're getting met with resistance somewhere, there's probably an alignment issue somewhere. So knowing that, you can back test, hey, what's really going on here? What am I running into? Right? Why am I feeling exhausted and tired and defeated? And it's generally because you're leaking energy somewhere. So I always take clients back to this piece up here. If I can figure out how to scroll it. There we go. It's going to leak energy either through distraction, doubt, disorder, or disconnections, usually one of those four. And then once we plug the leak, then we can move on. Because what we really want to do is move from the friction that this leaking energy does into fruitfulness, because that's why we're here, is to be fruitful, is to create like God created through language, right? Expressed in the content that we develop. And then that content, right, is then going to produce, it's the fruit, and it's going to, because we're in a garden, God put us in a garden, that fruit then is going to give way, the seed's going to be exposed, and it's going to hit the dirt, and it has the potential to grow another tree, not just another apple or whatever fruit that you want. And so it's the reason why this energy thing is so important is because if you start your day with some type of negative energy, it's literally going to drop you into this leaking pool right here. And you're going to waste a day or an hour or 2 hours or whatever, however long it takes you to get back to, okay, what's distraction, what doubt, what disorder, what disconnection am I dealing with? And so I hope you found this useful. As I said, I'll continually become more than I am right now. So any grace and words of encouragement would be great if this is having any type of an impact in your life. So be sure and leave a comment. I have some pretty thick skin, so any ideas, I will receive them gladly. So till tomorrow, stay blessed by the best.